Have you ever thought about the reason why it's so important to have a father? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but I was actually just doing some research the other day because, as you know, I've been really honed into making sure that I am helping out the next generation and raising funds for this youth training facility that we have going on. And I am just so touched and so moved and so convicted about what it is that I'm doing that I started to wonder, like, what is it that really is driving me? Like, what's the big deal, right? Like, what is the big deal? Why can't you let this go? See, it's like, why is this something that you keep on fighting for? And I started to think about it, and I started to think about, like, man, like, I remember when I was a kid and I didn't have a dad, like, there were certain things that I wish that I had. There were certain guidances and certain things that I missed, right? There were certain opportunities that maybe I didn't really take advantage of because I didn't have anybody pushing me. I didn't have anybody guiding me. I didn't have anybody to believe in me. I didn't have anybody to say, hey, C's, you really have this talent in this particular thing. Why don't you pursue this? Or C's, you're getting out of line here. You better put yourself back in check, man. Like, we need to get back over here. I didn't really have any of that. And so as I started to think about that, and I started to think about, like, man, I wonder what is happening as a result of fatherless homes, right? I wonder what has happened as a result of the past generation, my generation, that there was, like, let's just be real, there was a lot of fathers that were missing from their houses, right? And because of that, now we're going into a generation of women not necessarily wanting to have kids, or women just thinking that they just need to be independent because fathers were missing. So now they had to go and get into the workforce, and they said, screw the men, we're going to go make all the money. And what are the effects of that, right? What are the effects of what's that domino effect that's happening from my generation to this generation, where we have a bunch of boss ladies and we have all these people that, like, this cultural thing that is happening, this shift that is happening, right? And let me put it this way. When I look at the data and I say, wow, like, it's a cause and effect. Like, there's a thing that is happening because this happened, because this happened, because this happened, right? And we're not going to go too much into today's stuff, but I want to kind of go back and I want to kind of think about my generation for a second. And think about what were some of the effects that happened as far as me not having a father, okay? So let's go into that. As I was doing my research, I was looking at certain articles and I was looking at certain things, and I found a list of 5 things that tend to happen to a child without a father, right? So children that have no father in the home, these are the things that they're likely more to experience, right? They are likely more to experience these things in life. And I want to go through them, and let's just see if they're legitimate. Let's just see if, because I grew up without a father, if I experience any of these things, right? Or is this just a bunch of lies and propaganda and no good stuff? Like, what is this true? You get what I'm saying? So let's go through the list real quick. All right. So number 1, poverty. Kids and children and homes that tend to not have a father experience 4 times the amount of poverty. I would say this is absolutely true. You know, when I was growing up, we were like super dirt poor. And we grew up on food stamps, we grew up on government assistance, we grew up on the WIC program, we grew up on all these things. And I remember so many times the lights, the water, the heat, all these things were constantly being turned off. All of these things were constantly, we didn't know if we were going to have them from one week to another. We didn't know if we didn't know if that was going to be something that we had this week or next week or the week after. So many times I remember my mom filling up the water tub when she knew that the water was going to get shut off, right? She knew it was going to get shut off. So what she would do, she would fill up all the sinks, the tubs and everything, and we would just draw a little bit of water from there as much as we could for anything from bathing to washing dishes to, like, whatever it was. We would just ration it. We would just ration it out. It was just the craziest thing. It was the craziest thing. And as I grew up, I remember thinking, man, like, I really don't want to be this poor anymore. I really don't want to be this poor anymore. But that poverty kind of followed me into my 20s, and that poverty followed me into those points in my life where I was like, I didn't have the skill sets. I didn't have some accountability. I didn't have these things that were instilled inside of me to prevent that from happening. And I think that the reason we need stable fathers and we need stable men in the homes is because this is a true fact, right? And I'm not saying, this may be skewed just a little bit, because I'm not saying that mothers can't provide for their families or whatnot. It's just not innately what they're supposed to do, in my opinion, right? And the way that I look at it, a mother would rather raise her own child, to be there for her child, right? And to be able to, these days it's like they think that they need to provide for the child, but really back in the day, that's not what it was meant to be, right? Now, you can argue that point all day long. I'm not here to argue that point to say whether one is wrong or one is right. We'll do that in another video. But what I'm saying is that's culturally what's going on right now, is that the mothers are having to pick up the load. They're the ones having to do that because the fathers aren't showing up. And I get that. I understand that. So number one was poverty. All right. So the number two on the list was drug and alcohol abuse. Man, where do I start with this one? Yes. I abused drugs and alcohol 100% all the way there. I mean, if you're talking anything from having my first shots of Bacardi 151, that was like the very first drink that I ever had, to drinking a ton of beer, to drinking just a ton of alcohol over the years, going into using dope, methamphetamines. Like, these were things that I went and experienced. And I'm not talking about like I tried it a couple of times and figured out it wasn't for me. Like, I lived this life, right? I remember one year, I was just on a really, what they call, when you're in the streets, they call it a sick one. I was on a sick one, and I was super skinny, super sucked up, super I just look gross. And I'm out there, on meth. I'm smoking cigarettes, and I'm drinking and just getting drunk or whatever. Like, that was my life. That was the real deal. Like, I wasn't this healthy character that most people see today. I wasn't the Coach C back then. I was really just a lost kid that was trying to drown my emotions and my feelings and everything that I was going through, trying to find answers, and I was trying to drown them through these substances, right? I was trying to figure out, like, where do I belong through these substances? And I can't tell you how many nights I stumbled through the night, literally through the streets, just lost, just going through the streets, high as a kite, drunk as a sailor, just like feeling like things were just not lining up right. And I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do, right? Like, these were things that I experienced. So I can say on number two on this list, absolutely, 100%. Number three is that your physical and emotional health suffers. Once again, yes, I think that a lot of this has to do with, number one, I think cultural background of how, like, somebody feeds their kids, what that looks like, what was passed on from that generation to the next generation, how those habits happen. I say all the time, like, diabetes doesn't just run in your family, it runs in your habits. You get what I'm saying, right? Like, there's things that you're just feeding your family because this is the way that you were fed, or you're just feeding your family that way because that's all you know. However, when I think about the physical and mental health, I know that, for one, when I am around an environment that is having stress, anxieties, depressions, and things that make me feel down, I am naturally going to pick those things up. It's like picking up on energy when you walk into a room, right? You're naturally going to pick those things up. You are naturally going to take those things in because that is what you are around. That is your environment. And if you're in there day after day after day after day after day, week after week, year after year, it's going to become a part of who it is that you are. When I started getting out and becoming an adult and started getting on my own, I had to rewire the way that I seen things. I had to rewire the way that I seen the world. I had to rewire the way that I was reacting to certain things. I had to start to read books. I had to start to personally develop myself because I was just in a space where these things came to me naturally. Stress, anxiety, depression were just a natural thing that I was just like, this is how life is. This is why things suck. This is why I don't like certain things. And I was just totally focused on all the negative. So what I can say is, on this list, physical and emotional, 100%. I had ballooned up to 240 pounds before I lost 75 pounds and changed my life. I'm sitting outside of the gym right now. That's why I got the headphones and I'm like ready to go. But my physical health most definitely suffered because of the food that I was eating, 100%, the habits that I had developed, the food that I was fed growing up. When you're poor, you're not eating the best of foods. Like you are, if you're living off of food stamps and WIC, and you're living off of these government programs, that government block cheese, like you're not going to be the healthiest person that you could possibly be, right? And it's like your mom isn't necessarily using those food stamps to just buy you a whole bunch of vegetables. Maybe there's some special moms out there, but majority of the time what I have seen is I'm seeing processed breads, I'm seeing jams, I've seen processed peanut butters, I'm seeing bologna sandwiches, I'm seeing like all these sort of things that are just super cheap that you can get more quantity of, right? That's kind of like what is going on. So poverty definitely, from that first one, poverty going, that it trickles down into this number, which is about your physical and mental health. I can definitely see that 100%. Crime, holy moly. First and foremost, I want to say that I've never been in jail. I've never been in juvenile detention centers. I've never had to experience any of that stuff. Never got arrested, nothing. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't involved in crime. That doesn't mean that I wasn't involved in certain things that I never got caught for. Here's the thing. I did do crimes. I did do stuff. I did do robberies. I did do things where I was breaking and entering. I did all of these things, but I never got caught, right? And so when I look at this and I say, yes, crime 100% was a piece of my life, that's just the truth, right? So crime was definitely a part of what my lifestyle was when I was growing up. Heck, even into my young adulthood, when I moved out to Indianapolis, I remember like getting drunk and going and doing like stupid random acts of crime and vandalism and, you know, beating up people's cars, pouring sugar into people's gas tanks. Like, holy moly. Like, I tell you what, like I did some really bad things. And I'd like to think that all the years following that, because I went through like a lot of crazy stuff, and I feel like I paid for a lot of that. I feel like my last 20 years has been like, all right, so you want to do that? Okay, boom. Right? Because I've had a lot of adversity along that way. So I think that it's just such a true thing. And one of the reasons why it's important to have fathers in your life is because they can guide you away from that crime. They can hold you accountable. They can bring you back over, right? A good father is going to say, hey, that's not the path, man. That's not what we doing. That's not what we about. What are we talking about here? What are we saying? Are we allowing ourselves to be in that mindset? Did I raise you like that? These are things a father can say to your son and to your daughter. These are things that you can do as a father to prevent them from going out in the world and making a mess of their lives, man. So, all right, so the next one is sexual activity. Gotta take a drink for this one. Yes, 100%. 100%. Before I was 18, I was already having sex. I'm just going to put it out there. It is what it is. Way before I was 18, I was having sex for sure. And I was having sex with random girls. I was going and, you know, just like trying to figure out who I was, where I belonged. And I'll never forget, I went to this one party one time. And I don't know if it was a Halloween party. It might have been a Halloween party, something like that. And I went into this house and everybody's drinking, smoking, getting drunk, getting high, smoking meth, like all this sort of stuff's going on. And this random girl comes up to me and she's just like, you know, whispers something in my ear. I end up in the bathroom with her. We're doing the deed, right? Like we're just going in. And after I was done, I was like, oh, what was I just doing? Like, what was that? Like, that was crazy. And that became more of an addiction. And I wasn't saying that in a like, oh my God, I'm having a conscience about this. I was actually like, whoa, this is awesome. Like, this is like, oh man, this is like, whoa, let's go. Right? And I was thinking that, and here's the thing, when you have no boundaries, when you have no education in regards to sex and sexual acts, when you have no education, when you have no guidance, and somebody say, hey bro, that's not cool, that's not right, that's not good, you can't be doing that, you can't just be going and having sex with random girls. Like, and I gotta tell you something, like, this followed me into my adulthood for sure. This was something that I struggled with for years, 100%. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, this is something that into my adult years, I was like struggling with, because I just didn't know, I didn't have any context or any sort of boundaries around that sort of thing. I wasn't thinking about it from a spiritual aspect. I wasn't thinking about it from an aspect of like treating people right, or not doing that sort of thing as an example. Like, there was just no holds barred sometimes, right? And I've found myself in my adulthood like going back to some of those habits at certain times, and when I was coming up. And when I think about that, it kind of makes me cringe, because I'm like, dude, you let yourself just like get into some situations that you had no business in, right? And that had a lasting effect. And I see there's a lot of times there are people that are doing this, and they're doing this all the way into their 40s and their 50s and their 60s. And I was like, I just can't be that guy. I can't be that guy. Like, that can't be me, right? That's not who I was meant to be. I can't be disrespecting God like that. I can't be disrespecting the people that really believe in me. Like, I just can't do that anymore. Here's the deal. All of these things were very, very true in my life. And I'm sure that there's more statistics, but that was just a real quick list of things that I experienced for sure. And when I think about this, and I think about why I'm fighting so hard for these young people, it's because of stuff like that. Because when I was coming up and I didn't have a father and I didn't have the guidance, I ended up in all of those situations. I ended up in all of those situations that I didn't really think about. I was just living it. I didn't think like, oh man, I don't have a father, so I'm going to end up in poverty. I didn't have a father, so I'm going to end up being more sexually active. I didn't have a father, so I'm going to experience these things differently from everybody else. I thought I was just living life. Like, I thought it was like, this is just the way it is. But it's not the way it is. And you don't have to accept that, right? And we should not accept that from ourselves, and we shouldn't accept that for our kids, right? I think one of the reasons why I got into this space is so I can secretly go back and talk to all my friends and talk to the people who are raising kids right now. The millennials that are currently raising this generation, maybe it's just my secret way of trying to go after them and saying, dude, I know we had it bad. I know we had some situations go on. I know there was a lot of fathers that were missing in our homes, but we have to take responsibility for these kids. We got to, because the generation that's coming after, which is Generation Alpha, can you imagine what they're going to be going through? Can you imagine what their experience is going to be like right now? Like, they're coming up, they're just our babies right now, right? But they're going to be coming up in a world that is confused about genders, that is confused about parental roles, that is confused about all these different things that we're trying to throw out, right? These things that have worked for so long, we're trying to throw those things out. Like, I just walked through that whole list, and I just see my life flash before my eyes with everything that I had done, from the time of being a kid to now. And it's the craziest thing to me that we are not running around and freaking out about this. It is the craziest thing to me that more awareness isn't being put on this. And I understand, because I lived that life. I did it. I went through my phase too. I'm not sitting here criticizing you. Listen, I understand those things. But at a certain point, you need to put your wants aside, and you need to bring those needs of your children to the forefront. If you are somebody who has had children, it's time to clean it up. It's time to stop living like you were just a child, right? It's time to stop living like you have no laws that guide your life, that you have no bars that you have no boundaries. The problem with today's world is that we're living without boundaries. We're living in a lost world. We're living in a world that is saying, if I want to do something today and then change it tomorrow, that's completely fine. Like, there's no consistency. There's no consistency. There is just this idea and this ideology of like, I just want to do whatever I want and just leave me alone, and you shouldn't be judging me. What? Listen, you're doing wrong. I'm going to call it out. If you're doing something that is detrimental to your kids, I'm going to call it out. Like if you're doing something detrimental to yourself, I'm going to call it out. What are you talking about? Don't judge me. Like, listen, you need to be judged. Like, you need to be judged, not in a way of like, oh, you're going to hell, you're doing this, you're doing. I'm talking about like, listen, man, there needs to be some accountability. You need to stop doing those things. These are not the things that you're supposed to be doing. I hope that this video helps you in some way to realize that this generation is important. We need to make sure to take the time. We need to make sure that we become more active in everybody's lives. We need to help each other as a village. It takes a village to raise a child, right? Like, so start getting active in your nieces, your nephews, you know, your brothers and your sisters with their kids. Start getting active in their lives. Start getting active with your home. Make sure you take care of your home first and foremost. But start like putting some time into everybody else's kids too. Like, make them feel like they're surrounded by love, support, and accountability. Right? Because it can't just all be lovey-dovey. Like, we have to have some accountability. Anyways, this is Cesar Hernandez, aka Coach C, reminding you, my friend, to always, always, always live with purpose. We'll see you on the next video.